What's going on, everybody? This is Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com, at OccupyFantasy on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm your host, Moose. At CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. I'm data guru and co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, and I'm alongside Brian at BrianJesterFF on Twitter. He's co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy. How's it going, Brian?
Moose, happy week 3. What's up, man? How you doing?
Pretty good. I've been having to do venue shopping for a wedding reception, and it turns out you can't just be like, hey, I want this place, and yeah, it turns out it's just a lot more work than picking game stacks.
It doesn't work that way. That's for sure. Yeah, that's rough.
Can't make a model for that. So been on the grind for that, and but here still have time to look at NFL. We're here to talk to you about the Week 3 main slate over on DraftKings and FanDuel. If you all have questions during this time, we'll be happy to answer them. The plug is up, the model is up, and my first overall thought, Brian, is are we fish this week? Because Miami seems to be what a very popular stack talked about, absolutely crushed last week with them. And do we run it back against? My heart says yes because of what we have in the model and what was written in the plug.
I know, man. Yeah, a guy throws 6 touchdowns, right? You're like, all right, well, that's not going to happen again. We can't go back to him. And that was my first thought, too. I saw the high total early in the week. I was like, oh, we can't do that, right? But then the same reason we were on Miami last week is the same reason we're going to be back on him again this week, right? If you recall this show a week ago, we talked about how Baltimore was missing at least 2 of their top corners, 4 of their top 6 were injured, right? And now we fast forward a week, and Buffalo is extremely decimated in the secondary. Chris talked about this in the preview video that came out last night. But starting safety, Micah Hyde, who's like one of the most important pieces of Buffalo's defense, he's now out for the year after getting injured in that Titans game on Monday night. Dane Jackson, the cornerback, we saw him get carted off in an ambulance. He's out this week. Jordan Poyer is extremely questionable, their other safety. So Tre'Davious White's already on injured reserve. So, I mean, they're down at least 2, potentially 3 of their top corners, which is the exact sentence we said last week. And so it's not the only situation like that this week either, but there are tons of opportunities here. And again, we saw the upside last week. We can't expect 6 touchdowns again, but if we get 302 from Tua, that's still enough to win some tournaments.
Exactly, yes. And we'll just jump right into the questions here as well. Questions from David. It says, for small tournaments and satellite tickets this week, can a contrarian Cousins stack 3-1 have the same upside on FanDuel as one of the rushing elite quarterback stacks? Cousins is a salary saver, or do you guys like the Detroit side better for a game stack? Golf and 1-2 Lions.
Yeah, it's a good question. Cousins isn't contrarian because he's one of the top 3 projected owned quarterbacks this week, both on FanDuel and DraftKings. People understand they have a high team total, pass-heavy offense, pass on first and second down more than most teams, especially with the new coaching change. And and people are going to take that salary savings. As we talked about this time last week, we talked about all season long that these pass-heavy quarterbacks are how you win tournaments. And yes, you get the floor and safety of those rushing quarterbacks, but you have to pay for it as well. So yeah, I prefer game stacks, obviously, and I would rather pay one of those guys. I think I prefer the Cousins side. But I was as I'm building today, a lot of the top projected stacks that I'm building are from the golf side. So either one is fine. But the nice thing about it is, Moose, right? We have very clear target funnels. Justin Jefferson on the Minnesota side, Amon-Ra St. Jerry Rice, as you affectionately appointed him before we started streaming, on the Detroit side. Sorry, dude. Sorry. I don't know if you have another nickname for him, but yeah, but clear target funnels and the quarterbacks are cheaper. So yeah, we like that.
Definitely. Tom says, are there any games that people are fading that you think could be sneaky?
All right. So actually, I asked you about this. I asked our staff chat earlier, and I asked you too, Moose. One game that is popping for me, the model is really on it, and a lot of the wide receivers are underpriced, is New Orleans and Carolina. And this is a DraftKings only play, I think, because you really don't need savings as much on FanDuel as you do on DraftKings. And no one's going to play Jameis. No one's going to play Baker Mayfield. If you look at the model, we have Mayfield projected for 2% on DraftKings. Jameis projected also for 2% on DraftKings. But again, clear target opportunities. We saw Chris Olave literally had 300 air yards last week for New Orleans. Juwan Johnson's super cheap. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, they're super cheap. I'm looking at it, and if you want to fit in some of these stud receivers, or if you want to play the stud running backs, this game is a really cheap way to allow you to do that. And I don't know if again, Kristen recommended it. We're not fully recommended it, but to answer that question, Moose, I'm gonna play it myself. I think that's a sneakier game stack. Curious to get your thoughts.
I mean, I just think it's I think it's an overall bad play. I mean, you go from playing. We have like the saying bad plays only. I mean, and that's usually for like one offs or maybe a couple positions. But as a whole game stack, I just don't like it. I'm trying to find a reason why you'd like it, and you do get some salary savings. You can make some pretty cool lineups, but you're going to need Cooper Kupp to score 175 touchdowns in one game to help you out.
Easy,
but easy. It happens all the time. Let's see here. A question here from Sebastian says Keenan Allen for Aaron Jones full PPR redraft. Who wins?
Is that a season-long trade, or is that this week who scores the most points? Happy to answer. Not a season-long show, but we'll happily answer any season-long questions. But just clarify, is that this week's scoring, or is that a trade for you?
Yeah. And David says, what's your thoughts on a Bengals stack? 3-1. Is Burrow going overlooked? Brian, I think even I'm saying it. Is Cincinnati cooked?
They're almost at boiling temperature for sure,
Yeah.
right? Because
I mean, it's
I don't
tough.
know,
Again, biggest fan. I will absolutely find a reason to stack Cincinnati every single week if I have to. I don't like them this week. I said it again last week. I said I didn't like them last week. I don't I don't like them this week. I would stay away from Cincinnati.
So the only thing here is there's some underperforming metrics in a couple ways, right? And I've seen a couple great tweets and articles about this, how the Bengals offensive line obviously is underperforming, but from the sense that, and I think this is a Burrow thing, because remember, he didn't play in the preseason. Mm-hmm. He's getting used to these offensive linemen. They're still getting used to communicating to each other, because remember, 3 different guys they signed this offseason. But from the amount of pressure allowed, the expected sacks that you would think the Bengals would have based on the pressure they've allowed, the sacks are just like way more than you would expect. So assuming that normalizes some, that obviously helps them. And there's some info floating around about how the Jets don't play cover 2, and that's what the Bengals have been struggling with. Which again, that there's a lot of noise in those types of coverage samples that we've talked about. But you gotta like it. That thing just from an upside perspective, will they get there? I don't know, but the fact that you can double stack Burrow and Chase and Higgins, no one's really going to do it. Yeah. I kind of like it. So.
And don't forget the most important stat: Burrow deleted his Instagram or got off his phone, and so he said, "I'm ready to grind for my team." But
yeah.
Yes. Gitz has a question that has a lot of players involved. I'll just let you read it, Brian, if you want to answer it.
Okay, let's see. 0.75 PPR, the very rare 0.75 PPR. 2 running backs, 3 receivers, 1 flex. Running back, Saquon. Okay, it's this whole lineup. Okay. Do I trade London for AJ Dillon? Jesus Christ, dude. Yeah, probably. You're pretty loaded at receiver, so just make that trade.
Yeah. And Sebastian did say his trade was for season long.
I would tend not to target guys who are injured. We know Keenan Allen's got the hammy. He's not out of the woods yet with a re-aggravation. So anytime there's a close trade and one guy's not injured, give me the not injured guy. So I'll say Aaron Jones.
Makes sense. Test Nerdpone, it's a great name, says, how crazy am I for falling onto Wentz stacks, even though I'm an Eagles fan? And Brian, I actually mentioned it. We talked about it before the show. Some stacks that I like that it could be potentially sneaky. I do actually like that Wentz. I do like that Wentz side. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so the one thing that is concerning to me is obviously we look for defensive injuries to target, right? But if we look for offensive line injuries, that's when we target opposing defenses, and we try to downgrade passing games a bit. And they're already dealing with Wes Schweiger, who's dealing with an injury. But now their center, Chase Roulier, went out early last week, and I think he's on IR actually. Or either way, he's definitely out this week. But you lose your one of your best offensive linemen against the Eagles pass rush as a pretty big underdog. Wentz obviously has performed really well from a fantasy perspective early, but that's enough to get me off that as a full game stack. So I get it. Believe me, a lot of metrics will point to it. But when you look at some of the qualitative data and the offensive line injuries, I'm downgrading a bit for me personally, Moose.
What do you think about the flip side, the other side of that game? Maybe running back with one, like Curtis Samuel or something. Do you think that could get there?
Yeah, I prefer that much more than playing the Wentz side. But obviously it's more expensive, right? With Jalen Hurts. So yeah, if I had to choose, I still prefer the Philly side because while Philly is going to miss Landon Dickerson, probably their guard, you downgrade their offense a bit too. It's not as much as Chase Roulier. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'll take Philly side if we do decide to stack that one.
Okay. And Sean says, what's your favorite play on New England versus Baltimore?
The easiest play is Jacoby Myers, especially on DraftKings 5K. We got to watch his. I think he's okay. Didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday, but did come back Friday. It has a great opportunity share in that offense for his price tag. And we saw him have 9 catches last week. So I think he's the easy one. Bateman, still not out there running every route. Only what 5 or 6 targets last week. Obviously, really capitalized on those. Andrews, you can always say, but I don't know, man. It's not a great game environment overall, despite what we saw last week with Baltimore, because Marlon Humphrey another week to recover, Marcus Peters another week to recover, and Baltimore's getting back their number 2 corner, Brandon Stevens, who they missed last week, which is a big reason we targeted the Miami stacks. So, yeah, I'm not as high on that game, but if you want to play a one-off, Jacoby Myers is definitely my favorite guy there.
Makes sense. I can understand that. So yeah, keep the questions coming, guys. We love them, and we'll go ahead and answer them here. We're here until 3 o'clock or so. Brian, let's jump to the next game stack that is recommended to end the plug, and that is that Detroit Minnesota side. We kind of talked about that, and then actually the last one is the Rams at Arizona. Kind of take me through the high level of that game stack.
Yeah, really quickly, we talk about secondary injuries all the time. In that Minnesota Detroit game, safety Harrison Smith is out for Minnesota, so there's another bump to the qualitative data there for golf stacks. But as we alluded to when talking about the Buffalo injuries, there's another secondary that's extremely banged up, and that is the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey's there, but he can't do it all himself because as we look at this Rams-Arizona game, Durant, Long, and Hill, number 2, number 3, number 4 corners are all out for the Rams. Their free safety, Jordan Fuller, he's very questionable. Didn't practice on Friday. If he's out, that's 4 defensive backs that they're missing. At least 3 that are missing. They signed someone off someone else's practice squad. They called somebody from their own practice squad. You got 5 days to prepare with practice squad dudes. That's not a good look, right? So you got to like Arizona's guys here. And Ramsey, will he shadow? He hasn't been shadowing, right? So Marquise Brown's going to get some opportunities against these backup guys. So is AJ Green. So is Greg Dortch. I mean, dude, we get 3 defensive backs down, and they're starting practice squatters. Not even regular backups. We're starting practice squatters. Allen Iverson, we're talking practice, right? Like this is crazy. So you got to like Arizona stacks for that reason alone.
It was like when we played that flag football contest years ago, and we just went like, "Oh, we can do this," and then we realized without practice, playing against guys who've been doing it for a year, and we just got like triple skunked and left in 30 minutes.
Turns out practice is important.
Yeah, really good question here. I like from Matt. Says seems like there's a lot of good offenses to play. Is it harder this week to keep a reasonable player pool in MME?
I feel like it's always an issue, right? Some weeks you're like, oh yeah, this is pretty easy to pare it down, but yeah, this week is pretty tough, and you just got to make some tough choices. And I think what always comes back to me most is like, unless this guy scores 40, he's probably not going to hurt me, right? And if you're making decisions for MME, you're like, oh, I got to cut this guy and this guy and this guy. Just think about, all right, if I include this guy, what does he give me? Like, what does he allow me to do? Does he allow me to play more Cooper Kupp? Does he allow me to play more, I don't know, Mahomes or Kelce or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Or are these 2 guys pretty similar, but one dude's like 3% and the other guy's 18%, right? I'm thinking running backs here, right? Like Montgomery versus Miles Sanders or something, right? It's like, okay, well, that's an easy choice. Just if it's close and you got to pare it down, when in doubt, smaller is better for the style that we play. So, yeah, it's a little tough, but just make those tough decisions and see. And if you have to make a decision, you can't find any other way to decide a 1v1. Go with ownership or what it allows you to do with the rest of your lineups.
Yeah, I like that. It's a really good idea. Yeah, I guess you could also use the lineup builder for that as well. Like to make a completely separate slate group and run 150, 300, see kind of what lineups it spits and what combinations it gets for player A versus player B, and see which ones you like more with your total exposure, see what kind of fits. I think that's a good way to use it too. Sean says also, do you think Mac Hollins' last week performance was a rare ceiling game? His price is only $3,300 on DraftKings.
Yeah, that's super chasing to me. I know Renfro's going to be out. But if you watched the game last week, the only reason anybody else, because after week 1, everyone's like, shit, Devontae Adams is going to get 20 targets every game. They basically doubled him, right? Put a safety over the top, put a corner, and they were not going to allow Devontae Adams to beat him, except for that one time they fucked up and let him score on the like little screen pass at the goal line. But just watching that game, they weren't going to let him beat him. And whether that happens again this week, I don't know. But we can't count on Matt Collins to be a high target share guy in this offense. In fact, I would bet that Keelan Cole, who's going to fill in for Hunter Renfrow, gets more targets than Matt Collins this week. So I think it's chasing much better plays on the slate than Matt Collins.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense to me. What's up, Ed? He says, I'm late. Did we answer the best, worst, and worst, best? Not yet. We're waiting for you to join. And Brian, best, worst, and worst, best play.
Sure. All right. I'm gonna go to the model on my side, and I'm just gonna pull up really quickly who, if I can figure it out here. Okay, let me go to flex here. I'm gonna sort by ownership, and the highest projected own guys that we have right now in the model are David Montgomery, Leonard Fournette, Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Those are the guys 15% plus. To me, it's got to be Montgomery, right, as the worst best play. We're playing him because he's 5,900 on DraftKings. Playing the Texans, they're favored. Looked good on Monday night, but Khalil Herbert's still there. I don't know, man. I'd much rather play some other guys than David Montgomery off a short week as well. So yeah, give me. Okay. I think he's the worst best play. The best worst play is someone like.
Are we running it back with Dortch again?
I don't know. I think the best worst play is Scotty Miller.
Ooh, that's digging deep.
3,800 on DraftKings. Right, they're gonna be without Mike Evans. They're gonna be without Chris Godwin. It sounds like Julio Jones isn't gonna play. Right, they called up Cole Beasley from the practice squad, and Scotty Miller. He didn't catch a lot of passes last week, but Brady was throwing to him nonstop. He has the familiarity over than Gage. So I'll go Scotty Miller as the worst best play, worst play, whatever the clarification is.
Yeah, and Ed also says the Colts give up 87% catch rate to tight ends. Are we locking in Kelsey?
I mean, it's only been 2 games, right? And if you're going to lock in a player, it's really tough to lock in a tight end who is, pretty expensive, 7,900 or something. Let me see. Yeah, 7,900 on DK. That really handicaps your lineups. Yeah, there are other ways. I mean, there's a lot of ways he fails too, right? So, I don't know. I like Kelsey. He's tops the model this week, but locking him in, I think it there's too many other ways that a lineup can win without Kelsey.
It's kind of crazy. He's the most expensive tight end by outside of Andrews, it's like, I don't know, like $3,000.
Like $3K.
Yeah,
yeah, dude, it's crazy.
Speaking of tight ends, are we running back Kyle Pitts, or are we going off the owner's thing and say no, he doesn't have to catch balls for us to win as they go 0-2.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, this isn't fantasy football. We play to win. All right, well, maybe fucking throw the guy who you drafted 4th overall when you're 0-2, right? How's that sound? Maybe that's a good plan. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I will say, if we're looking for reasons, right, we're looking for injury reasons, Seattle's slot cornerback is out, Justin Coleman. Pitts lines up in the slot a decent amount. Maybe they get him right this week, right? Maybe people finally have aggravated Arthur Smith enough to get Kyle Pitts the ball. We'll see. I don't know. The model's not a big fan, so we'll trust it again this week.
Yeah, definitely. Tess says Cordell Patterson over Montgomery fade for the middly easy peasy. And what do you think about Cordell Patterson this week?
Yeah, I still don't think they want to use him that heavily. Just based on everything they said. The only reason he got such heavy usage in week 1 is because Damian Williams got injured like immediately, and they had to. I don't know, man. Tyler Allgeier's there. They'll use Patterson out wide some. I don't know. I get it, right? Like, I don't mind. If I had to choose between the two, yeah, give me Patterson over him at, a third of the ownership. But for me, and we haven't really talked about it yet, but my favorite play that's in the same price range is Miles Sanders. Half the ownership. Really good matchup here against Washington. Has actually been getting the ball more this year than he has last year. The model's picking up on him. He's top 6 or 7 in the model.
Yeah.
Miles Sanders is probably my favorite running back play. I'll have a ton of him this week.
And I've noticed, when we were first doing the model, and the model was the first on this, where before the season and the off season, we're like, man, these running back rankings they seem odd. These high priced workhorses aren't at the top of the model.
Yeah.
And Brian, over the last 2 weeks, we've seen those high priced, very expensive, very popular running backs aren't getting there. So by playing someone like Miles Sanders at 5,500, opens you up for a lot more of these expensive wide receivers who are getting there.
Yeah, man, this is the way it's working. And I know someone in the chat is talking about Adam's talking about CMC only 8% owned. Yeah, I mean that's typically the spot we would look to target, right? Even like Derrick Henry, he's 7% owned or whatever, right? But it's like, all right, Derrick Henry's missing his left tackle. Derrick Henry's broken 2 tackles in 2 games. Clearly doesn't look the same. McCaffrey, we're playing him for his targets, right? He has 10 targets through 2 games, which is good for a normal running back, but it's not good for 8.8K McCaffrey, right?
Yeah.
We're normally seeing him 7, 8, 9, 10 targets. That's when we play him. So yeah, again, I get it, but would you rather play McCaffrey, who's going to get 5 targets at 8,800, or would you rather play Devontae Adams in the same price range, or would you rather play Cooper Kupp for a little more, who's pretty much guaranteed to get 20 points plus more? So I get it, man, I get it, but if you just look at the state of the NFL right now, the state of the DFS slates, the pricing, it's really tough to play those guys, and it's really hard for me to find ways that they end up optimal outside of like some crazy 4-touchdown game.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's not just you're rooting for their ceiling; you're rooting for like their ceiling. It's very hard for them to get there, in the current way that they're being played. Qualkites, welcome. He subscribed, and face I haven't seen in a while, so welcome back, Qualkites.
Yeah, what's up, Q?
He was getting a promotion like every week.
Oh yeah, what's up, dude?
And Ed says, contrarian build of the week is pay up for running back and tight end, or my over Galaxy braining ownership. Brian, I think Ed's has had too much Galaxy brain.
I think so. I mean, we talked about it last week. We talked about in the $1 Million Mission. I think it's the key thing, right? These early slates, 13 games, the way the pricing is, the way the NFL is playing right now, it's a really bad idea. I understand the game theory lineup construction aspect, but it's been a really bad idea to pay up for running backs in these early weeks. And will that change? Potentially. But I just can't get behind paying $9K for JT or McCaffrey or Henry or even Eckler, Dalvin Cook even to an extent, right? It's really tough, man, when you can play more balanced lineups this early on. Yeah, sure. When we get to week 8 and there's 6 teams on by, then maybe that makes a little more sense. But this early in the season, it really does not make a ton of sense to pay up for these guys.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if their price ever goes down and we're playing like 5K McCaffrey. then
Right. I mean, okay, if they're like 7K, sure, right? But like,
Yeah.
if you literally look at, and we were talking about this in the staff chat today, and for those who know Josh Hermsmeyer, that has the air yard buy low model. He writes for 538. He was talking about this new running back opportunity metric. It's a very similar metric to what Mike Clay does over at ESPN, right? It basically looks at how many expected points should a running back score based on the type of touches, the amount of touches, where on the field, down and distance, near the goal line, all this stuff, right? And if you just look at expected fantasy points per game, McCaffrey is outside the top 12. Dalvin Cook is outside the top 12. Jonathan Taylor's outside the top 8. Who's the other one? Derrick Henry's outside the top. I don't even know where the fuck Derrick Henry is. He's outside the top 20, right? Like, when you can get guys like Mixon who are way cheaper, way more opportunity expected. Antonio Gibson, Fournette is cheaper this week. A.J. Dillon, Miles Sanders, these guys we've been talking about. Michael Carter even. The guys the model is picking up on, right? Because it's looking at a lot of the same type of data. When you're getting similar or slightly less opportunity for like $3,000 cheaper, it's a really bad idea to be paying for those guys.
Yeah, you pretty much hit that on the head, and Ed will definitely clip this when he wins his 333 ticket, locking in Kelsey.
Yeah, Kelsey, I don't mind. Like, I would much rather pay $7,900 for
Of
Kelsey
course,
than
yeah.
I'd pay $9K for JT or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that goes into David's question of thoughts on CMC in large tournaments. Brian, I don't like it.
I get it. I mean, I get it, right? I really do get it because we've seen his upside in the past. However, with Baker Mayfield and this offensive coordinator, who I think Kevin Gilbride, right? He has not had more than 5 targets in a game through 2 games, which is scary if you're going to pay that price for CMC.
Yep. And it's funny. YouTube is like, now would be a good time to insert ads. No, I don't know. Nah, we're not putting ads here.
Yeah, just as we're getting to the good stuff, let's put in some ads for people.
Think Green has a good question here. It says, it seems interesting the running backs on Miami are popping in the model. What's your thoughts on that? Is it because it's the high total? Seems like them having good games means the overall game isn't a big shootout.
It depends, right? Right. Like if those guys do well, it likely means Tua and Tyreek and Waddle aren't having ceiling games. So just think about the type of game script you're running. I don't mind running them back on Buffalo stacks because of the price. The problem is that we had Edmonds have a great role in week 1, and then Mostert have a great role in week 2, and we don't know who's gonna have a great role in week 3, if any of them, right? So for me, if you're playing small field, you just ignore the situation. It's not like the ownership's gonna kill you if they get there because Chase is 5% and Mostert is 4%, right? And small field cash games, obviously, you're not playing those guys. But if you're playing 150, you're playing 20 max, mix those guys in because week 1, Edmonds had 10.5 PPR points. Week 2, Mostert had 10.5 PPR points. This is without any of them scoring touchdowns. If whoever leads, right, good luck picking that. I still lean towards Edmonds because of his pass catching.
Mm-hmm.
If Edmonds leads, gets in the end zone, that's 17 PPR points roughly, right, that we're expecting from a lead role at 5K, right, and that's a lot. But again, this is a super large field contest only type situation. Maybe running back with Buffalo or pair it with like Stephon Diggs in a mini stack. So yeah, I get it. But again, it's not something that you have to play. Sure, Moose, we trust the model, but just you got to be smart about these situations.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah. So you pretty much hit it on the head there. Sean says 3x1 or 2x1 stacking Arizona and your favorite run back not named Cup.
Yeah, I mean, if all those secondary injuries are true, and I mean, I don't even know why I said that because they are true. It's on the injury report, right? Then we're gonna play 2 receivers from that side, right? We have a chance for a shootout. Again, most we've said if Kyler gets there, it's likely due passing. So, yeah, I think 3x1. You play 2 Cardinals receivers. Pick your favorites. Maybe Ertz is included in that group. Favorite run back not Cup has got to be Higbee, right? Tight end super gross. He's only 4,500. He's had like 1 million targets through 2 games. Top 5 in the model. Higbee's the easy run back if you're not playing Cup.
Yeah, definitely, pretty much. And let's see here. Yeah, you pretty much did the same thing. I was just banning that guy spamming on the channel. Yeah, Ben McAdoo, Gilbride is a tight end coach. Okay.
Oh, yeah, okay. Just insert shitty offensive coach there, and same. So Ben McAdoo, same thing.
Pretty
Sorry
much,
for sorry for any Ben McAdoo or Gilbride fans out there.
Yeah. Mr. Tarian says, "Hey guys, thanks so much for what y'all do. I guess my first question is, who's your favorite wide receiver play?"
Good. Just let me look real quick on who my highest owned guys are this week because I've run some builds on DraftKings so far, and a lot of this can generally tell you who favorite plays are. Diggs, Jefferson, Gabe Davis, right? You gotta like the Buffalo stack there. Chris Olave, super cheap. We talked about 300 air yards. The Detroit receivers. Honestly, most the receivers I like this week are the ones in the 3 game stack environments that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think any of those wide receivers in those game stacks are a great play, and I would start there. Yep. BSK Gaming says tips for the $1 20 entry contest. So I guess for 20 maxing.
Oh yeah. Here I'll link the strategy guide in the chat. We talked about 20 max strategy in there. Oh, that's the wrong guide. Let me strategy guide NFL. All right, here. I'll put that in the chat, BSK. And yeah, the 20 max. If you scroll down to the mass multi-entry strategy at the bottom, in that strategy guide, it'll detail everything you need.
Sweet. Yep. And if you have any more questions, like I said, there's the Discord, Twitter, all that good stuff. But yeah, so we've pretty much hit that 3 o'clock mark. So if anyone has any last lingering questions, now is the time to ask. Brian, let's go to the final segment, and I'll bring up the wide receiver model here. And under, what do we do? 5%?
Yeah, under 5%, I think is what we did.
And was there a particular price range we did for DraftKings?
I think we can leave it, right? We could under 5%.
Okay. And so this is which low-owned wide receiver is going to score a touchdown. And as you see on screen here, we have the model. You can check out OccupyFantasy.com. Screen cap it now if you're not a member, so you don't have to, so you can see it. And yeah, under 5%. Who do you think gets that touchdown?
All right, let's see. Under 5%, who gets the touchdown? I talked about the sneakiness, that New Orleans Carolina stack. That's the meth I'm on it stack of the week. I gotta like Michael Thomas, Chris Olave there as the guys. But honestly, dude, Moose, even Robbie Anderson is under 5% here. So I'll cheat and say those receivers from Carolina and New Orleans, right? Here's my prediction. We'll get at least 2 touchdowns from Carolina and New Orleans receivers, and all of them are under 5%.
Okay, that's very strange.
What do you got?
Very cop out answer. I'm going to say, hey, I'll say it for you. DK and Tyler each get a touchdown.
Under 4%. I like it though. I like it. DK can score at any time. Tyler Lockett's has some sneaky good volume there too. So, there's your stack of the week. Most the Geno Smith double stack with DK and Tyler Lockett.
Definitely. And BSK says, "What's y'all's biggest win this season?"
My biggest win was week 2. Obviously, check out the $1 Million Mission. Right, hasn't been a great year so far for me. Still early. I think 25,000. Right, Moose was the big one.
Yeah.
But that's a great transition to our interview with Junior JR, our longtime member who won $200,000 last Sunday. We interviewed him here on the channel. On Wednesday? Talked about his process and what it's like to win $200,000. So go check it out. That's a great interview. A lot of people enjoyed it. Shout out to Junior. And if you're worried about wins and process, check out the $1 Million Mission BSK. That's our weekly Tuesday series.
Definitely. Yep. So that'll do it for today's show. Again, if you have any more questions, you can check out the Discord, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Always Twitter as well. And Chris will be doing the Discord Q&A tomorrow. Don't know exactly what time. I think 11. And we'll break down any last preseason or pregame news and any last final questions that you all have. But until next time, Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy, have a good night.
Peace.